Okay. Show me.
It hasn't been easy. There's been a couple of trial and error moments, a couple frustrating moments, and some disappointment and discouragement, but definitely not enough to stop me. I feel like having the suspension on this El Camino is the biggest part of this project, the hardest part to conquer because there's no plan for it. I was molding a C4 Corvette suspension to a 1971 El Camino chassis. I didn't find anybody who'd done it. I've seen some pictures of something similar, and I just went off that. I pretty much had to make it up and learn as I went. So now that I have a rolling chassis, the El Camino's back on the ground on 4 wheels, holding itself up. The next big step is going to be putting in the motor and trans. Now I had to fit all this Corvette suspension on to make the truck handle better. And a big issue an El Camino has, it's very front heavy and there's no weight in the back. So your balance point is way up front and it makes it hard to drift it and to handle it and maneuver it properly and to keep it flowing. So what I'd like to do is move the motor back just as far as it would be in the Corvette, therefore getting my balance. But that means a lot of cutting, a lot of fitting, a lot of measuring.
So right now, we're shooting for this pole on this side of the steer.
JM and Brent came by, giving me a hand because this was a big thing that was a little tough to do on my own. So what we did was we lifted up the motor and we placed it in the engine bay where it would sit as if it would stock, and to see how much that firewall I'm gonna have to cut out.
I think we have a problem here.
I'm estimating I'm gonna move the engine back approximately 8 inches. Now that's a lot of room that we need to work here. And also because this is a race car and it doesn't have to remain stock, this gives me an opportunity to move the engine back, but also make sure that when I build this thing, I have room to work around it.
Just for reference, like the end of pages, that's where the shifter can go back and forth. Okay. Good for it. Just keep going.
We first placed the motor inside without the transmission to get an idea of how much room we're going to need and what we need to cut out. After that, it was simply pull the engine out of the way and start chopping away. First thing to go was making the transmission tunnel big enough to fit the new transmission. So I'm using a transmission from a truck. It's an NV3500, and if you ever worked with those before, you know that they're big and they're bulky. So I'm going to need a lot of transmission tunnel room to fit this thing underneath. And because of the lower suspension, the engine is actually going to sit a little higher than stock inside the body, so I can get the car way down low to the ground, so the transmission will sit higher inside the cockpit of the car, which is going to be kind of interesting because it might end up giving me like really high tunnel, like almost like the RX-7, more sports car feelish. But the really different thing that's going to happen here is now the drive shaft and the transmission tail and everything will be above the floor of the car. I'm thinking this way I can get extra low, or if it bottoms out, I'm not taking out any transmission components. My oil pan for the engine, that's a different story. After cutting the transmission tunnel out, making kind of room there, I start digging into the firewall and try to take it out as much of one piece as I can instead of having a bunch of metal shards lying around. I was a little worried at first cutting out the firewall. I was worried the structure of the car, but if I cut in the right places, I should be good. I left the inside of the dash mostly in there, or everything that's behind the dash, to give it some sort of structure. Next, we bolt the engine to the transmission and try to fit it in all together like that to get a rough idea of where it's gonna sit. Inside, I got an opportunity to see where I need to take more material away to figure out where I'm going to build my mounts, my brackets, and stuff like that. So I take this opportunity now to clear out as much room as I can so I have room to work without cutting out anything that could potentially be really important structure-wise to the chassis, the body of the car, to make sure everything stays square and stays straight and lined up. Brent and I spent a lot of time making sure the chassis on this thing sitting on the jacks was completely level, corner to corner, squared off, nice, everything was good. So anything that we do put on this car, cut off or build or mount, we can use a level and get it perfect set the way we need, which is kind of what we had in mind for getting the proper pitch of the engine compared to the drive shaft. We spoke about this before and we'll get into it a bit later. But right now, the engine's in, I have a really good idea where we're going. It's just get back to grinding, get back to work, make it all fit together.
It's fucking awkward. I just want to put music on so none of this gets